Tension continues to rise in Hong Kong with violent protests intensifying. Josh Hawley, the U.S. Senator from Missouri, warns that Hong Kong is in danger of becoming a police state. He just got back from a trip to Hong Kong. He joins us now from Washington to talk about that and also the NBA's problem in China. Let's dive into what LeBron James recently said, and then the letter that you sent to Adam Silver. And just very quickly, you reminded the NBA that some things are more important than money. Are they listening to you?
Apparently not. I mean, it's something, having just been in Hong Kong myself, being out on the streets with the protesters, seeing the evidence on the ground, seeing what's going on, and then to come back just in time to hear LeBron say that people who take the side of democracy aren't informed about the facts. I mean, has LeBron been to Hong Kong? I mean, does he know the facts? Do any of these NBA players who are out against Hong Kong, do they know the facts of what's going on? I mean, it's really striking. Here's my message to the NBA. Don't become part of Beijing's communist propaganda machine. Show some independence.
So forget about the NBA for a moment. You're a member of Congress. What do you think the U.S. should be doing, if anything, to support the protesters in Hong Kong?
I think it's time the Senate passes the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act, which is an important piece of legislation that will allow the government, our government, to sanction officials, Communist Party officials, who are part of this crackdown in Hong Kong, and will give us a variety of tools to bring pressure to support the people of Hong Kong. I mean, the situation in Hong Kong is urgent. It is becoming a police state. And it directly affects American interests, because what China wants to do with Hong Kong is steamroll it and then steamroll their neighbors and ultimately dominate us. And we can't allow that to happen.
Got to ask you, though, how do you think the Chinese would retaliate? We're in the middle of a very contentious trade fight with them.
I think the trade fight is actually helping the situation in Hong Kong, and I say that because protest leaders told me that. They say the fact that the U.S. has pressure on Beijing has actually stayed Beijing's hand to a certain degree, and has made them think twice about bringing in even more repressive tactics. So the message with Beijing is it's never wise to appease dictators. It's never wise to appease authoritarians. You got to stand up to them. They understand pressure. You got to put pressure back.
And so then the problem is, though, if you sort of bring pressure on them regarding Hong Kong, does that then risk being part of the negotiations over trade and pulled back as part of a trade deal?
Well, listen, I think that the president has been doing a great job of keeping the pressure on Beijing. He's gotten the outlines of what looks like a very good phase one deal. And my sense is that Beijing is very, very eager to lift the pressure of these sanctions and the pressure of the trade war, which they started, by the way. So this is not the time, I think, to let up pressure. And in the meantime, on a separate track, passing the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act would really give us some teeth to be able to say we're not going to look the other way if Beijing tries to just gobble up Hong Kong.
Senator, I've got to ask you, because I think a lot of us celebrate the championship for democracy in places like Hong Kong, but when you say you can't appease dictators, and I'm not saying that Mr. Erdogan in Turkey is a dictator, certainly a strong man, why is that message also not being shared, say from people like you or Republicans in Congress, with the president? I know that there's the joint effort to stop what's going on in Syria, but we opened the door for that.
Well, listen, I think that we shouldn't abandon the Kurds, rather, and the Turks. We need to send a clear message to them that overrunning the Kurds is not acceptable. We need to sanction them if necessary in order to make clear to them that they are not permitted just to execute human rights atrocities and human rights violations. But let's not lose sight of the fact that Beijing is the biggest security threat to this country in the 21st century. And what's going on in the Asian Pacific arena is the key region for our security and for our prosperity in the 21st century. And what Beijing wants to do in Hong Kong is directly tied to American security. It's one of the reasons we need to stand up.
And so does that mean we take our eye off the ball in the Mideast? I mean, if indeed China is the priority in terms of security threat, and you talk about sanctions on Turkey, we've put some sanctions on Turkey. They don't seem to care.
Yeah. Well, listen, it means that you have to prioritize, and we have to be able to walk and chew gum. We always prioritize in terms of our national security threats and priorities. And, you know, we can't do all things at the same time. So does that mean that we take our eye off the ball in the Mideast? No, it means that we keep our priorities in the Mideast focused, which is counterterrorism. And we've got to make sure that terrorist organizations like ISIS, like Al-Qaeda, are not permitted to reform such that they can strike this country. But we've got to also be clear that the #1 security threat to this country and to our prosperity and the prosperity of our middle class is China in the 21st century, and we've got to be ready to confront that Chinese threat.
And President Trump has absolutely stood up to the Chinese, but would you oppose this administration if it were to produce a partial deal that didn't address the very issues you're talking about? Because it looks like we're being set up for phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 indefinitely.
Well, I'm sorry, in terms of having a deal that doesn't address Hong Kong, my view is
that address China, you know, the trade issue that we're negotiating with China. You've brought them up as, you know, a major threat to our security, both economically and physically.
Yeah, right. Well, and this is one of the reasons I think we need to press them for free and open access to the Indo-Pacific region. I mean, look, China would love to shut us out of that entire region. We just can't have that. I mean, we need to be able to export our goods. We need to be able to export our products. We need fair and equal access to those markets in that region. And this is why it's so important to keep the pressure on them, as the president is doing, to press forward in trade negotiations. And I think it's also separately important to keep the pressure on with regard to Hong Kong.
Senator, thank you for your time. Senator Josh Hawley joining us from Washington. Thank you.